The word jinn is mentioned in various parts of the Holy Quran, but there's a lot of mystery and unknown related to this topic. Join me, your host Umair Khan, on today's episode of Ramadan with MTA as we go into further detail discussing the interesting topic of jinn in Islam, and we will also be taking our viewers on a virtual trip all the way to Kabab in the Middle East. And towards the end of today's program, we will be speaking to a senior medical student from the University of Toronto discussing knee and hip pain. Stay tuned to Ramadan with MTA.
रूहों में उतरती है सदा मुल्हिम हक के अल्लाह से बंदे को मिला देते हैं रोज़े.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Jazakallah for joining us on another episode of Ramadan with MTA. We are here at the MTA International Studios in Canada, and we have a very interesting program for all our viewers. But before we get into these interesting conversations, we will be listening to a tilawat from the Holy Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولقد خلقنا الإنسان من صلصال من حمأ مسنون.
And surely we created man from dry wringing clay, from black mud wrought into shape.
والجان خلقناه من قبل من نار السموم.
And the jinn we had created before from the fire of hot wind.
Welcome back to today's program. We have a very exciting program for all our viewers today, and we will be starting today's program with a very interesting discussion. As many of you just heard, the verses of the Holy Quran that were recited, so we will be having a discussion on the topic of jinn. And to help me with that conversation is actually a really good friend of mine, Musleuddin Chambur Sahib, who is currently serving as Professor Jamia Ahmadiyya Canada, and I understand you're a professor of Arabic right now. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to our program today.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah.
So Muslim Sahib, before we even get into this conversation, I remember I first met you in Jamia. I think you're the first person I actually met from Kabab. You were born and raised in Kabab. And viewers at home, I'm actually a really big fan of basketball. And I remember when Muslim Sahib came from Kabab, he started playing with the Jamia students basketball. And he actually started improving, and I was so excited and happy. Do you still play?
I still play whenever I get the chance, but nowadays, with the current situation.
Yeah. So yeah, inshallah, one day when the pandemic is finished, we could play each other. So as you just heard, the verses of the Holy Quran, this is a very interesting topic about jinn. And this whole topic about jinn, there's so many misunderstandings. There's confusion on this topic. So very simple question for our viewers so we can understand the whole concept of jinn, especially in the Holy Quran, is what does jinn mean?
Yes, so this topic has been proven to be complicated historically, but the word jinn, according to the Arabic language, according to the root word of it, it means something or a human being or a spirit that is invisible or concealed most of the time. So for example, the word jinn itself, it could mean human beings that live in remote areas on the mountains, human beings that are very strong, that live in the wild. So, and even each word, not each word, but so many words in Arabic language, if you look at if they mean something that is invisible or concealed, the root word of it, or it will be derived from the word jinn as well. For example, if we take the word janeen, the fetus in the mother's womb, it is also covered, hidden in the mother's womb. The word janan, it means heart. It is also covered with the chest. The word jannah, it also means garden that is covered with trees. And even there's actually one word that is interesting. The word, it's used in Arabic and Urdu as well. We say majnoon, right? So the word junoon itself, the root word of it is jinn. So the word junoon itself, it means a barrier that arises between the soul, a person's spirit, and his brain. So a disconnection is created between a person's soul and his brain, and this, due to this, mental illness is caused, or like he loses his senses. He can't think properly anymore. So it's possible that they take the meaning of jinn controlling a human being from the fact that when someone gets mentally ill at some levels, they start hallucinating things. So at the same, so on the Holy Quran, as far as the Holy Quran is concerned, all the words of jinn in the Holy Quran are mentioned in accordance to the definition that I just mentioned. I can just mention one simple example that about Hazrat Sulaiman alayhi salam, peace be upon him. Hazrat Sulaiman alayhi salam, it is mentioned about him that he was provided with an army made of jinn and also shaitan, Satan, right? So this type of jinn was building for him big buildings and was also diving in the oceans, bringing gold, bringing jewelries, right? So that type of jinn historically had been proven that those people were people who used to live in the wild, right? And then he captured them because jinn is also meant to be rebellious. And we will come to this later on. But that's why he captured them. And it says in the Holy Quran that they used to build those big pyramids and buildings while their legs are shackled, musaffadin, in the Holy Quran. So this, if the literal, or the according to the concept that they take of jinn means some sort of ghost, how can the ghost be shackled?
Wow, Jazakallah, just in a few minutes you've clarified this so much. I wish I had met you in high school. I used to have a lot of non-Ahmadi Muslim friends, and sometimes, you know, these conversations, we would talk about jinn. I mean, I know we're going to come to the false notions of jinn, and the stories they would say, I would just be like, I've never heard of these stories, you know, at our masjid. So we'll come back to that. I want to go back to the verse that, you know, we started the program with. And it's really interesting. The verse mentions that man has been created by dry, wringing clay. But, you know, it explains that the jinn has been created by, you know, a fiery, hot wind. So if you could just, you know, shed some light, what does that mean? You know, what does it refer to, jinn being made of, you know, hot, fiery wind?
So the Holy Quran speaks a lot in different terminologies and figurative language that are not meant to be taken literally. Yeah. So there are so many examples in the Holy Quran, even with our day-to-day discussion, even in the English language as well. For example, when you say someone's on fire, this man is on fire, it doesn't really mean that he's actually sitting on fire. It has its own meaning, right? So likewise, the Holy Quran uses a lot of different terminologies and figurative language. So the word jinn being created from fire, it means people who have different temperaments. You know, fiery temperament is something people who and also the Holy Quran furthermore explains what this means. So in different verses, God explains what the word fire mean, or jinn being created from fire, because later on it mentions that shaitan, the Satan, was also created from jinn, kana min al jinn. So it says that because shaitan was from jinn, it disobeyed the Prophet. So having fiery temperament means that a rebellious action or rebellious people, right? Whereas on the other hand, having man being created from clay, it means people who create productive things. People who are productive, they create things from clay. You know, we build buildings, we build a lot of things. On the other hand, the fire destroys. And one interesting point here is that the Holy Prophet ﷺ mentioned that the anger comes from Satan, and Satan is from fire. And to extinguish your anger, sit down or drink water. And sometimes he said even take a shower, because the water normally extinguishes the fire. So he said, so there's also verses in the Holy Quran that define how, for example, one last example, there's in Surah Qari'ah, God mentions that وَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ, that those rebellious people, their mother is called fire, narun hamiya. Their mother is called fire. They don't really have a mother that's called fire, that is fire. It's just, again, figurative language to refer to people who have fiery temperaments.
Jazakallah. That was amazing. You clarified so many misunderstandings within a few minutes. To our viewers, very interesting conversation we have going. We're going to come back to this conversation. We're going to listen to a hadith of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam right now, and then inshallah continue this conversation.
عن ابن عمر رضي الله عنهما قال: سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول: كلكم راع وكلكم مسؤول عن رعيته. Hadrat Ibn Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, narrated, I heard the Prophet of Allah, may peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, say, each one of you is a ruler and will be answerable in respect of his subjects.
So Muslisa, we just listened to this hadith. I was wondering if you could, comment on it for our viewers.
Yes, I remember once I read that Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Khamis, Ayyadallah bin Nasr al-Aziz, he explained this hadith very beautifully. I'll just say it in a few seconds. That everyone is responsible, so a leader is responsible for his people.
Right.
An employer is responsible for his employees. In a family, the man is responsible for his family. Even the mother is responsible for her tasks at home. So Huzur mentioned that each one will not be only asked about, for example, men normally think that I'm responsible for the expenses of the house. You will not be asked like this. You will be asked, how did you carry out your responsibility overall? So how did you treat your wife, your children, your everything? It's not just one simple task. So this is all encompassing.
Okay, Jazakallah, Jazakallah. So going back to the conversation we were having earlier about jinn, now you're born and raised in Kabab in the Middle East, and I'm curious to know, outside Jamaat Ahmadiyya, right? What are some of the notions that you've heard about jinn? I mentioned in high school, I had some friends that they totally had they would talk about jinn being monsters inside caves, and some people I've heard spirits or demons. What has your experience been for interacting with people who are outside the Jamaat, and what are some of the common notions that other people have?
Yes, unfortunately, especially in the Arab culture, the jinn is very common in a way that, for example, the Maulwis, the so-called Muslim scholars, they are known to be the experts who can haunt jinn. So haunting jinn means that they can call it and it can come and they can speak to it. So when in Kabab, basically in Palestine, I have a friend, he's a professor at a university. In a nearby town, it's called Al-Khalil. It's actually the town of Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam, Khalilullah. His grave is still there until today. So he told me once a very interesting story about jinn. So he said that there was a man in Khalil town. He announced that all those people who have severe back issues, they should come to me and I can do a 2-minute surgery and they will be completely fine. So people started going to him and they actually had the 2-minute surgery and they came out completely fine. And even people went in limping, they came out walking fine. Even doctors and pediatrics started going to him. So after 1 month, all those people had even worse pain. So my friend, the professor, he had challenged his friends. He told them that I don't believe in jinn like this, and he explained to them the jinn according to our concept. And you guys will find out, you people will find out how this jinn is not really, there's something else going on. So after 1 month, they found out that this was just an injection that numbs the back pain.
Okay.
And after one month, it comes back even worse. So that man eventually was actually arrested. So this is very unfortunate. Some kids and some people end up being killed by these so-called Muslim scholars, the Maulwis, because the way they exorcise the jinn from people, they just beat them specifically from the feet. Sometimes they jump on them, and they keep beating them. Sometimes they end up dying, and they blame the jinn. Whereas there is nothing like this in the Holy Quran. The Holy Quran never mentions from the first word to the last word, even hadith. It never mentions jinn in this concept. It does mention jinn, the disbelievers mention the jinn, that the Holy Prophet ﷺ had jinn in him, but it was never addressed by God that this is the concept of jinn, or even in hadith. So in Islam, the word, this specific concept does not exist.
That is so interesting. It is unfortunate, the stories you're telling me, but I'm happy that, alhamdulillah, that you clarified, and I'm hoping that our viewers at home, whether Ahmadi or non-Ahmadi, Musleh Sahib has been able to really clarify, and it's so very logical how you explained it from the verses of the Holy Quran. Musleh Sahib, this conversation is so interesting, but I do have to move on to the next segment, so you stay put. And just a heads up to our viewers, as I mentioned, Musleh Sahib was born and raised in Kabab, and now we're going to take all of you to a virtual trip to Kabab. So our guests, our viewers, please follow me, and I think we'll be speaking to a good friend of yours, Muaz Ode Sahib. So let's see if he is online. Muaz Ode Sahib, Assalamu alaikum, are you there?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Muaz Sahib, thank you so much for joining us. So I wanted to ask you, you're in Kabab right now. I wanted to ask you if you could just share some general information about Kabab for our viewers.
Assalamu alaikum, and I'm very glad to be with you this evening. Kabir, it's located in the northern of Israel, and it belongs to a city called Haifa. Kababir as a town was established in 1850 by our great-grandfather. His name is Audi. Audi is a guy who came from a small town near Jerusalem, and he came with his wife and 5 children and started his life in Kababir today. And since 1850 till today, 2021, the population of Kababir is around 1,800 people. 70 to 80% of this town is from Audi family, and most of the town are Ahmadis.
Jazakallah, Muasab. I also, we've heard so much about Kabab, Jamaat, and I think the whole world, Ahmadi Muslims all around the world have, we watch the MTA programs, and many of the scholars from the Arab world come from Kabab. I have one right here, Musleh Sahib. So I wanted to ask you if you could just give some background about Jamaat Kabab, and when it was established. Do you have a masjid? Do you have prayer centers? If you could just shed some light on that.
And inshallah. In terms of the history of Jamaat in Kabab, what happened in 1924, our Musleh Maw'ud, in his journey to Europe, he stopped in our city in Haifa, and he traveled. He was visiting the places in Haifa, and he met some people in Haifa in 1924. And then in 1928, he sent the first missionary, Maulana Jalaluddin Shams, who came from India to Palestine, Syria, Palestine, and he met, and he actually also he met the people of Kabir who worked in downtown Haifa, and where the train station, where the train station stopped, and I think he met the people of Kabir, our great-grandfathers who were working in the port area and downtown area. They accepted the teaching of the Jamaat and Ahmadiyya, and the Mahdi has arrived, and they invite him to Kabir in 1928 and establish the Jamaat here in Kabir. In Haifa, we have one mosque. It's our mosque in Kabir. We have one main center in the Holy Land, and we have a branch in the West Bank in a small town called Kufr Sur. And I think that's what and we have only missionary also we have in our center in Kabir. Yeah, and that's about how is the history of our Jamaat since in 1928. And as you said, as I said, the most of the population of Kabir are Ahmadis.
Thank you, Odisab. And with Ramadan happening right now, what are some of the activities Kababir Jamaat is doing during Ramadan? Is it virtual? Is it in person? If you could just share some information on that.
Alhamdulillah, we have every year we do a weekly what do you call it, food boxes that we send to people every week, and by the Saddam, there are programs of providing packages of food to to unfortunate people, and if like anybody who needs the food, not only Muslims and not only Ahmadis, for the whole city of Haifa, and that's it's a good thing that we're doing every year. Alhamdulillah, we will have a Taraweeh prayers, as usual. The rules that we'll have, every after the Fajr prayer, so we'll have these activities, and also we have that every day, every breaking the fast, every iftar, that one person can bring, some food, some dates, and all some drinks, people to break the fast in the mosque. So we have this tradition for the past, maybe 15 years that we have, one person bring some, food for people to break the fast in the mosque. I think that to have that, that's our tradition we're doing here. And I think also with the pandemic, also we kept the programs running, for Khuddam, Ansar, Lajna, Nasirat, via Skype or Zoom or any virtual programs. So we met each other even via these technological things.
When you were explaining the situation during Ramadan, I was thinking maybe Muslim Sahib's childhood memories are also coming back. But inshallah, I hope you also get a chance to visit home again. So Odis Sahib, a very important question. What is the national dish in Haifa, or any food that you specifically love that you want to tell us about?
And I think that's the most important question about the food, and I think it's whatever is called the Palestinian or Arabic food. We do any we call stuffed things, stuffed zucchini, stuffed eggplants, cabbage rolls, anything with rice and meat. We have the kubbi also as part of our traditional food. We have many different kind of salads and dishes. I think what we have, but yeah, I think it's. Inshallah, we'll have a wonderful Ramadan this year. So we have also a family gatherings also. So inshallah we'll have this.
Jazakallah. I'm hopeful that inshallah after this pandemic we actually get an opportunity to meet face to face. So inshallah I look forward to that.
Inshallah. I'm planning to come on August. Depend on you guys now. Depend on Canada how the thing is happening. So.
No, inshallah, hopefully this pandemic situation gets better and that day comes, then Musleh Saab, myself, we can meet you in person. Jazakallah, take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So there you have it, folks. We just took a virtual trip to Musleh Sahib's hometown, Kababir, and we're going to move on to the next segment of our program, which is also a very fun, interesting segment. And I'm especially excited about it because we're actually cooking one of my favorite foods that I just got addicted to growing up, in high school. So before I do that, I want to introduce our viewers to our chef today, Zubair Janjua Saab. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
So excited to have you here, and thank you so much for giving us time.
No problem.
So Zubair Sahib, just to give some background, Zubair Sahib, he runs restaurants here in the Toronto area, and you specialize in Middle Eastern food.
Yeah.
So he's the right guy for this segment, and I hope you all could see, but I see that you have some chicken.
Yeah, today we were cooking chicken shawarma.
Chicken shawarma.
So I'm going to show you how to make chicken shawarma at home.
Okay, so let's start right from the beginning for our viewers.
So we need chicken. So I rather use a chicken thigh because they have more fat, it's more tender. If you use a breast piece, it gets really dry.
Okay.
So I already marinated the chicken. It's salt, black pepper, some chili flakes, and lemon.
And how long are you supposed to marinate?
So there's like almost 4 hours if you want to get like a proper taste.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So about 4 hours marination, and then what's the next step?
Next step, we'll cook the chicken. While we'll cook the chicken, we'll cut some onions, tomato, parsley, pickled turnip for the wrap.
Okay, so are you going to show us
Yeah.
what you're going to start cutting? Or?
So let me just start cooking the chicken first.
And also if you could show the viewers the proper way and size to cut the chicken whenever you
Yeah.
get a chance. Yeah.
No problem.
And is there any specific type of oil you would recommend to cook the chicken?
Any oil.
Any oil is
Vegetable
fine.
oil,
Okay.
vanilla oil, or
Okay, okay.
any other oil.
So Zubair Sir, while you're setting up and cooking, I was wondering, I'm always interested, like how did you get into this field? Was it
So
your
since
passion?
I was 15,
Yeah.
I was working in a restaurant.
Oh, okay,
And
okay.
my dream was to open my own restaurant. And like 3 years ago, we opened our own restaurant. So now, alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah, you fulfilled your childhood dream.
Yeah.
Good. And
So while the oil is getting warm, we'll just chop some onion.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you about chicken shawarma. I know most people, including myself, we usually go to chicken shawarma restaurants, donairs, Middle Eastern food, and so this is the first time I'm actually seeing it being made at home. So I think that's really good for our viewers that during Ramadan, especially considering it's a pandemic, this is a really good recipe for those of us instead of heading out. It's something we could make for iftari.
Yeah.
And I know that would be a dish I would love. So
we'll just put some chicken on it.
just a quick question. So when you cook the chicken, right, you cook it like that? So
Yeah.
don't cut the
Cook
pieces
it like,
later.
because it's easy to cut it after.
Oh, okay,
Right,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. So I actually had an opportunity to serve for a few years in the Caribbean as a missionary in Jamaica.
Yeah.
And they have their own foods that are very popular, like jerk chicken and other recipes they have. But I was surprised a lot of people there did not know about chicken shawarma. And I kept thinking, like, if somebody introduced Mediterranean food in the Caribbean, and I mean there was a few restaurants, but majority of people actually didn't know too much about it. So maybe you should open a restaurant in the Caribbean.
Inshallah, one day.
Inshallah, yeah. Well, Zubair Sahib, you're cooking. So I'm going to visit some of our other friends here. And inshallah, in about 15-20 minutes, I'm going to come back and I look forward to seeing the final dish. It's already looking pretty good. I can
Inshallah.
smell it. Musa Sahib, can you smell it?
I can smell it.
I think Musa Sahib, I think we could all smell it. I'll come back to you.
No.
So
Barakallah.
to our viewers, we're going to Qasim Chaudhry Sahib. Qasim Sahib, assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Murabbi Sahib, I see you're in front of books. I wanted to ask you, what book will you be introducing to us today?
Well, today I'm very excited to share with you and the viewers an excellent book written by the second caliph of the promised Messiah, alayhi salam, Hazrat Mirza Bashiruddin Mahmud Ahmad radiyallahu anhu. And that book is titled Way of the Seekers. Now, this book has a wide array of topics, and so I decided to present a few topics which I found very interesting. And Hazur deals with a lot of age-old questions and a lot of difficult concepts and topics, but Hazur has this unique ability to really simplify these complex subjects. For instance, Hazur talks about morality. Now, there's a question out there that, let's say I'm a good moral person, right? Can I be a good moral person without religion? So Hazur really easily, he answers this question and says that, morals and religious life are two different things. You can be a good moral person and not necessarily a religious person or a spiritual person. So these two things aren't synonymous. They're two separate things. Then Hazur also explains that being religious or religious life is what we can call spirituality. And spirituality is a little bit different than morality in the sense that morality refers to interhuman connection with two different people, whereas in spirituality, there's a motivation of God in that equation. So that's how Hazur makes this difference between these two. Hazur then goes on to describe what the perfect man is. Right? So Hazur explains that in every field, we look for an ideal person, right? Whether it be medical or let's take the example of the sporting world, right? Like who would be the ideal athlete? Now some people would argue that that's LeBron James. He's doing it both on the offensive and the defensive, right? So he's that ideal person or the athlete that everybody looks forward to, and that's who we have. Now, when it comes to spiritual perfection, right, what do we have to do? What are some things that we got to cover? Hazrat Muslim Maud anhu explains that we have our relationship with God and we have our relationship with man, right, with people.
Right.
And similarly, Hazur adds that not only that relationship with man should be good and God, but you have to have a good relationship with yourself. You got to take care of yourself. The Holy Prophet ﷺ said that, taking care of yourself is also a very important aspect of life. So this is how he breaks down and explains that this is who the perfect spiritual man is.
That's really interesting. These are pretty complex topics, but as you said, one of the beauties of Hazrat Muslim Maud anhu, and I've experienced it too, is that he's really good at simplifying a lot of these concepts in a way that it's easy to actually explain to other people. And I feel this is really important, for a lot of our youth, right? So like we have Ansar Daud Saab here, he's a medical student at med school, and I'm sure you have your run-ins with, different students, and they ask these questions. They're very realistic questions. I wanted to ask you, I remember in this book, we as missionaries were asked a lot about the tarbiyat of children. And I see a lot of parents in the Jamaat, regardless of where they live, they have a very serious concern about how to morally, train and raise their children, especially in this day and age where many of our parents have migrated to the West, and it's very different for them, the way we're exposed to a lot of Islamic, distractions, right? So I wanted to ask you if you could just touch on what Hazur talks about in terms of, the proper way of doing tarbiyat of children.
This book is an excellent resource if you're an expecting parent or you're already a parent on how to deal with the moral training and upbringing of your children. Now, Hazrat Muslim Maud anhu, in fact, in this book lists over 25 tips on how to, deal with your children in the best possible manner. So I'll just share a few with you, which I found really interesting. Hazur actually talks about cleanliness, that you should do your best to keep your child neat and tidy, right? Now, the reason Hazur says this is because medical research actually shows that when the first time a child sins, it's due to their uncleanliness.
Like their physical uncleanliness.
Exactly. So when a child's dirty, they have that tendency to, rub themselves or scratch themselves, and then that sort of gives them the experience of pleasure for the first time. So it's very, very important that we keep our children clean. Now, another point which really resonated with me is that Hazrat Muslim Maud anhu said that parents should be the one choosing the friends, right? So, your child's going into school, right? It's the parents' responsibility, and it's up to their discretion who their child hangs out with, because our company has a huge influence on our own character, right? So you are who you keep your company with, right? Now, a third thing that Hazrat Muslim Maud anhu said that I really enjoyed is that we have to, when it comes to food, lunch, breakfast, dinner, all of that kind of stuff, we have to make sure that our children are fed at appropriate times. That creates discipline, that they're given the right amount of food, right? That we're not giving them too much food either. So this also creates discipline from the onset.
Exactly, that's really interesting. As a father myself, like when you're talking, it's actually a good reminder, even for me. So Musa Saab, I wanted to ask you, I know, mashallah, you have two adorable children, 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And I know you've read this book too. Have you found these tips practical and useful? If you could just comment on that.
Yes, I did actually. I can mention one of the good techniques. I tried many of them. They were all successful, but one technique I really liked is that he mentioned in this book, that when you put things in front of your child, or there's like chocolates or food on the table, and you don't want your child to touch them, right? So normally people put them away, so he can't touch it. He can't touch it. So he said, don't put them away. Just teach him that this is here, you shouldn't touch it. Say it again and again. And I actually tried this and it worked. They learn self-control, at the same time they learn to listen to you.
That's so interesting, mashallah. So there you have it to our viewers at home. It's called Way of the Seekers by Hazrat Muslim Maud anhu. And with all the books, they're available on alislam.org. I would highly recommend this book, especially for university students, and especially for parents. As you just heard, Muslim Saab, a father of 2 kids, these points that Hazur has mentioned definitely work. So Jazakallah Qasim Saab for that insight. So I'm going to ask all the viewers out there to follow me towards the last segment of today's program. And this segment is always really interesting for me. And we have our guest today, Ansar Daud Saab, who is currently a senior medical student at the University of Toronto. Ansar Saab, Assalamu alaikum, welcome to the program.
Assalamu alaikum, Jazakallah for having me. It's been a very interesting program so far.
Yeah, so Ansar Saab's been, he's been enjoying the rest of the program. So Ansar Saab, you're going to be talking about, knee and hip pain. And this is a really common thing, I notice even myself, unfortunately I'm at that age now, where if I play for too long, I start getting these random, pain in my knee especially. Thank God hips are okay for now. But I wanted to ask you, knee and hip, problems and pain seems to be a pretty common problem in a lot of people. If you could just give some background as to what it exactly is and why it happens and who does it happen to?
For sure, that's a great question, and you're right. Hip and knee pain is actually one of the most common problems that older adults face. I think the first thing to really talk about is what is hip and knee pain, because a lot of times people they'll point to this part, which is kind of higher up here, and they say, oh, my hip hurts. That's not actually your hip. So I'll use our friend here to show you a little bit about the hip and the knee joint. So this is the thigh bone or the femur, and this is the acetabulum. It's like a cup. So the hip joint is like a ball and socket joint. And so one way to actually tell if you're pointing to your hip is if you look at me, pretend like you're putting out a cigarette, because cigarettes are bad obviously, and you keep your hand here. If you turn your foot like this, you can actually feel this bone over here on the side of your hip moving in and out. So that's how you know that's the level of the hip that you're talking about. Okay. And then we look at the knee joint here. It's made up of 2 bones, and it's more of a hinge joint. So this is the femur and this is the tibia. And then there's a lot of soft tissue structures as well that I don't want to get into the detail of, but there's like a meniscus, there's tendons, there's ligaments, and pain in those 2 areas really, that's what is being referred to as hip or knee pain.
And what are some of the common reasons for knee and hip pain?
Right, so now that we've ruled out some of the dangerous things, and the first most common reason is something called osteoarthritis, or when you hear the word arthritis, that's really what we're referring to. And I can talk a little bit about that. So each of the bones in our body, at the place where the joint is, we have something called cartilage covering the bones. And that's a very smooth surface that allows for low friction movement between the 2 bones. Okay. And I want you to think of cartilage like the tread on your tire. When you have a new tire, it's a very thick kind of tread. But over time, as there's wear and tear, it wears down. And so when the bone starts to be exposed and that cartilage wears down, there's nerve endings in the bone, and that ends up being very painful for the person. And that's what really causes osteoarthritis. And so people can get stiffness, they can get that clicking and that crunching sound, okay. And they can really be impaired in their day-to-day activities. The second most common reason is the soft tissue stuff. And so if you have an injury to any of those things, or if any of those things get torn or swollen, I want to group those together as soft tissue reasons. But usually with those, they're worse in certain movements. So if it's in a certain direction or feeling in a certain area, I know you mentioned you're an athlete, and you must have heard of things like ACL tears or meniscus tears, bursitis. Those things usually have a bit more of a defined starting point. So you might know around what time it might not be a specific injury, but you might know when they started. And the third most common reason for having pain in your hip or knee actually doesn't happen in the joint. It's what we call referred pain. So you see these nerves that are coming out of your lower back. Sometimes those nerves can be irritated or pinched. And that you might feel in your hip, sometimes in your knees, sometimes in your ankle. And that kind of pain is usually more tingling, achy kind of pain. And that's not actually happening in the joint. So if you look at the hip joints here and the knee joints here, they're some of the most weight-bearing joints in the entire body. So you see they're holding up our entire upper body. And so the heavier a person is, if someone's overweight or obese, that can lead to more loading on that joint and earlier osteoarthritis.
So for all the basketball, soccer players out there, we got to be a little careful, especially when you're like me, getting older, right? I wanted to ask, is there any like exercise, stretches, or anything that a person can do to kind of reduce that pain?
For sure. I'll show you a few exercises. I think the first most important thing to know is the preventative measures are the best. So weight loss is a really good way to prevent your joints from getting worse over time, as they'll, like I said, they'll decrease that load there. But in terms of a couple of exercises, I can show you some hip and knee exercises if that's okay. So I'll show 2 for the hip and 2 for the knee. So one of the exercises you can do for your hip, as I lie down over here, is just a straight leg raise. So if you just raise your leg like this, hold it for a second, and bring it down. Or you can do both legs, raise them, hold it for a second, and bring it down. So what that does is actually strengthen some of the muscles, and it decreases the load on the joint that I mentioned. Okay, so another exercise you can do for the hip is very similar. Just lying down on your side like this, and lifting your leg up, holding it for a second, and bringing it down. Lifting it up, holding it for a second, and bringing it down. And doing that exercise about 10 times and repeating 3 times a week will also start to make a difference. Then for the knee, I can show a couple, very similar again. Raising your leg up like this, lift your knee as far as you can, pull your toe towards you, hold for a second, and then bring it down in a controlled way. So repeating that 10 times. And then the last one I'll show you for the knee is actually a very good one. If you put a pillow or something small like this under your leg, make sure your heel doesn't get off the ground, and push down against the pillow, and then release. And push down, and release. And doing that about 10 times will also strengthen the muscles in your leg and relieve some of that pain.
Thank you. That's really interesting and pretty easy, not complicating at all. And so those of you at home, Jazakallah so much for, you introduced some exercises for the hip and the knee pain. I could definitely use some of those for knee pain. So Ansar Saab, I see there's a box here, so I'm just gonna, make my way right here to the box.
Sure.
And if you could just tell us, what's in this box.
For sure. So I have something in this box that I think is very relevant to what we're talking about today, and it's actually a pair of running shoes. And so the myth that I want to talk about is that exercise makes your pain worse or makes your knees degenerate faster. And that's actually false. Although I did mention to you earlier that heavy, repetitive trauma to the knees might make things worse, but actually what the research shows is that doing exercise is actually better for your knee pain. And that's for a couple of reasons. Number one, it can actually have an anti-inflammatory effect. So what I mean by that is it can kind of slow down the progression of osteoarthritis, and some of the evidence even suggests that it can help repair that cartilage that I was talking about. And secondly, by strengthening the muscles in your legs and your hips, that actually decreases the load on the joints. So that'll actually end up hurting a little bit less.
Jazakallah. So some things I'm remembering, weight loss, that was so interesting. The good impact weight loss has, and also if you're having pain. Well, with pain, we're quick to go to like Advil, Tylenol, and medication. But thank you so much. These are ways to reduce the pain, and exercise is a huge part of it. So Jazakallah, a lot of good tips. Ansar Saab, thank you so much for sharing that insight and knowledge. And now before we end today, I'm going to go back to our good friend, Zubair Saab. Zubair Saab, trust me, I did not forget about you. So we're going to take our viewers back. As you remember, Zubair Saab was working on a very delicious chicken shawarma dish. And Zubair Saab, how are things looking?
Almost done.
Almost done.
So we're gonna shred some chicken right now.
Okay.
I'll just show you how to slice it up.
And just to review, you were saying, and I'm kind of happy that you mentioned it because I actually thought it was always chicken breast, but you said chicken thigh is better to use because it's more tender.
More fat in it.
Okay, more fat
tender
in it.
because
Okay.
chicken breasts always get really dry when you cook more, right?
Okay.
So try to, like I use chicken thigh. So we can just shave it off. If you want, use fork, knife. It's up to you. Whatever is easy to hold something. So I also had some toppings for you to choose for shawarma, and you can use any pita from grocery store.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've seen a new trend recently. I guess it's like, I don't know if it's a Pakistani Indian touch to it, but in Vancouver, one of our Jamaat members, he has a restaurant. So he put this new taste to the chicken shawarma, is that he actually puts it in naan, freshly made naan.
So there's a lot of different type of shawarmas out there. So everybody, like, you know, in the Middle East, there's a lot of, like, in Lebanon have their different tastes. So everybody have their different tastes. So whatever is easy for you.
A lot of variety, a lot of options.
Yeah, a lot of variety. So I'll just show you how to make the shawarma. So you can use any pita from the grocery store. So what I do, I try to open from the one side of the pita.
Yeah.
And then just open this much so you don't have
halfway.
to. You don't want to rip the pita, right? Because then your topping's going to come out.
Yeah.
Right? So what topping do you like?
Okay.
So I have hummus, which I already made, some lettuce,
I
tomato,
love hummus,
onions.
lettuce. What I usually say is everything except onions. Onions are a little strong for me.
No problem. So we'll just try to put hummus first. So just a runny paste. So you want to have every single bite of hummus.
And so the chicken is supposed to be last after all the vegetables.
Chicken is
Okay.
last.
So
just
lettuce,
put a little
tomato.
bit lettuce. You want tomatoes?
Yes, lettuce, tomato. You got the hummus. Let's skip. This is parsley, right?
That's parsley, yeah.
I'll skip the onion and the parsley. And this is the pickles.
That's pickles, that's turnips.
Oh, turnip. Yeah, turnip's pretty good. I like turnip.
So pickles are like cucumber pickles.
And then I noticed sometimes there's different sauces. I've heard of doner sauce, tzatziki. I mean, hot sauce is common too.
Yeah, so hummus, tzatziki, and garlic sauce is the most popular sauces to use in shawarma. So we'll just put the chicken now inside.
So Musa Saab, I know you can't see, but looks pretty good. I feel like I'm at Zubair Saab's restaurant right now. Getting like a special custom-made
garlic sauce for you. I already put it in the bottle, so it's a little running paste.
Oh, nice. I hope the camera guys are getting this. It looks pretty nice.
Would you like any hot sauce?
What? Oh, you have. Okay, you came well prepared. I didn't even see that. Yeah, I do usually prefer hot sauce.
My hot sauce is really hot, so I'll just put some dots for you.
Okay. You're making it look so fancy. I feel bad that you're gonna cover it up and just roll it.
Yeah. So now, try to push it everything like this, and then try to roll properly. Right.
Wow. Awesome.
And if you have a panini press at home, you can use the panini press. I do have this grill over here, so I'll just use that one to toast it.
Oh. So I noticed, so you said they put it in the panini press, and you mentioned there's a reason for it.
To seal the shawarma, right,
okay,
basically.
okay.
So this one, with the heat, it seals the shawarma.
So
when you cut, you don't want to have all the topping all over the place, right?
Oh,
so
okay,
it stick together.
So these are little tips ordinary people don't know about.
Almost done. So I'll just try to cut it for you.
So here goes the final cut. There you have it. Wow, that looks amazing. Jazakallah. So Zubair Saab, amazing dish. That's the final presentation of our chicken shawarma today. So Zubair Saab, thank you so much. It looks awesome, looks amazing and delicious. But you know what? We have a brother here from Kabab. I'm gonna get the visual approval from him, see what he says, because I know he's a big chicken shawarma. So I'm gonna take this to him.
No problem.
So Musa Saib, the chicken shawarma is coming to you, and we will get your final visual approval. And you could tell our viewers according to how you're used to seeing chicken shawarma. So here it is. I know you couldn't see it earlier, but there you have it.
It looks pretty good. I don't know how it tastes, but it looks very good.
So is this usually the way they also make it in Kabab?
They make in Kabab we make it differently. But in Lebanon, they make it this type.
Oh, so this is the Lebanese style.
Yes, this is
okay.
Lebanese
How do
style.
you guys make it in Kabab?
We have a thicker bread. It tastes different.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, to all our viewers at home, thank you so much. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode. I wanted to especially thank Musa Saib for that very interesting talk on the topic of jinn. Big shout out to Zubair Saib for teaching us how to make this amazing looking chicken shawarma. Qasim Chaudhry Saib shared with us Way of the Seekers by Hazrat Muslim Maud radhiyallahu anhu. Thank you so much, Qasim Saib, for enlightening us with that knowledge And Ansar Daud Saab, thank you so much. That was very interesting about knee and hip pain. And to all the viewers at home, Allah bless all of you, keep you safe, take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
रूहों में उतरती है सदा मुहिम हक के अल्लाह से बंदे को मिला देते हैं